On the topic of that and also processing facilities, because you mentioned earlier today that there's 37 that account for how much of it?
96%.
96%. How did
It's mind-boggling.
how did we get to that in the context of the hog industry? Because I've understood under other industries that's happened, but with this one, and then also accounting for the fact that 91% of hog farms have closed since 1980. Is it because of, again, the same big players that control it all eventually, and then they can control the prices and can control who processes it all, or what that happened to where it's nipped
Yeah, I
back?
mean it's the whole evolution of concentration and consolidation. But the slaughter and processing industry, they keep figuring out means to run the lines faster and to run two shifts. And when you start doing 1,100 of them per hour, 16 per minute, and you do that for two shifts a day, and you raise 100 million and change of pigs in the United States, that scale of plants, you only need about 37 of them apparently to get to 96% of the hogs. And what's even scarier when you start to look at that concentration is there's a dot on the map out there in Iowa that it's like somebody told me, don't quote me for sure, but I bet it's pretty doggone close. 60% of the pigs in the United States live within 100 miles of that dot. So I'd argue, not just from taking care of the animals, not just from vibrant rural communities. I mean, we could go on and on. We got a Gulf of America or Gulf of Mexico, whichever you want to call it, that's got a dead zone that's huge. We've got 70 to 90% of the surface water in the I-states are impaired. And industrial agriculture and livestock production plays a huge factor in all of those. We've economically gutted rural America. But I'd argue the biggest thing that we all should get really, really worried about is that we have a food supply that when it's cranking, it's really, really efficient and productive. You have to give them credit for that, whether you like the manner and the corners that they've cut and every way that they've figured out how to cut costs. It really is very efficient and very productive and produces a huge amount of food. Not the greatest, but I think what we really ought to be concerned about is whether or not our food supply is resilient and whether it's really, really fragile. There's some disease issues that the national pork producers and the USDA and all of them love to talk about how we have to protect our animals from, African swine fever or foot and mouth disease or whatever. It hits in one area in Iowa. We legitimately don't have a pork supply in this country anymore. We just got done seeing avian influenza. It hits in the wrong farms when you have 200 farms in the United States that produce 90-some% of the eggs, because we keep about one hen per person in the United States, so 300 and some million hens. And when there's if you're a hen in the United States, you're just as likely to live on a farm that has more than 1.5 million hens on the farm than you are to live on a farm that's the midpoint of hen production. So, you do that in 200 farms in the United States, and it's kind of hard to call them farms, but farms, produce most of the eggs in the United States. That's a very fragile system. If one or two farms that happen to have 3 million or 12 million birds catch avian influenza, that's a sizable percentage of the production. We have a hog system now in the United States that if one of those farms in that circle in Iowa gets African swine fever or pigs can't come into that area, pigs can't leave that area, we're right back to the same as COVID, where we have a processing structure that can't even function in the United States, and we've seen what we did with that. We put 1 million hogs in the United States in holes in the ground, some of them with ventilation shutdown, where all we did was turn the fans off and turn the heat on in the buildings because we don't even have the common dignity to kill the animals that we had too many of. I think that that's a moral and ethical situation, and then I think that's a resiliency situation, that we're affluent enough of a society that we could do something a little bit different than allow a handful of multinational corporations and billionaires choose that they're going to cut corners that you and I wouldn't cut and create a food supply that's neither resilient nor ethical.
The whole resiliency aspect, I mean, COVID was the perfect example with toilet paper, but also food. And I mean, there's quite a few farmers and ranchers I've connected with on Instagram to where that was their emphasis behind even starting to grow their own food, was realizing how fragile the system is because it's so centralized.
Yeah.
And so if you take out one, that's huge.
And the little processing plants, and I think societies, and especially our politicians, have already started to forget it. But the little processing plants really, really shined at the beginning of COVID. And granted, there wasn't enough of us. There was really long waits for people to get bookings.
Mm-hmm.
But the amount of production that they turned out, and more than they were doing before, that's just so much 180 degrees different than what the big plants, because the big plants closed down and literally didn't produce anything.
Mm-hmm.
And the little plants just kept running like, yeah, there's a pandemic going on, but, it's our job to produce food.
What's the cost and I guess the barrier to entry for starting a new plant? Especially with how centralized it is now.
I've got a couple friends. I think you actually can get into the USDA inspected slaughter and processing game for probably as low as $300,000 nowadays. If you're in the right location, you want to do some of the work yourself, you're a little bit lucky, you're really, really stubborn. The list goes on, but I think to get into it at a scale appropriate level so that you stand a chance of actually functioning, so that by the time you get the equipment that you need, by the time that you live in virtually any jurisdiction where you're not going to want to spend the whole rest of your life fighting over, because there's a fairly decent checklist. By the time you get wastewater that's approved, by the time you get occupancy permits for the structure and fire and egress and, everything. And, I'm not naive. There's portions of rural America where that's not looked on as much as there's in the city where that's, every single thing's got to have a commercial design review before you can even start to think about. So, you could go anywhere from 300,000 to 5 million would be my numbers I'd throw out for basic entry to get into slaughter. And, that's before you start to put the scale appropriate equipment in there to make it so that you can actually afford to make your payroll every Friday, because when we go look at the processing plant there's one portion in our processing plant where you can stand and within about a 10-foot circle, by the time you get our roll stock machine, our vacuum stuffer, our tumbler, our slicer, in those various rooms, you can have $500,000 wrapped up in entry-level automated equipment. So, you can get millions into equipment to keep your labor in line. And if you're going to do that, then you're in that whole situation. I think we talked about it the last time on the podcast. You're in that situation where you legitimately have to kill animals and put them in plastic bags 5 days a week. And I got into this because I'm a pig farmer and I want to continue to be a pig farmer. And yes, I realized that slaughter plants are a necessary evil, especially in 2025 if you're going to be a pig farmer, because we have to sell pork. There's no legitimate market for live pigs in the United States. There hasn't been since 1997. But I don't want to wake up in the morning, and my son doesn't want to wake up in the morning with our only job being killing things and putting them in plastic bags. And, we kind of somewhat, not to get too far off down a wild rabbit hole, but we kind of actually make our job even more difficult and kind of like economically tie our hands behind our back partially and then a fist fight because, we don't believe that people are actually designed to kill animals 5 days a week. I just don't think that that's really what people, and you've seen our help that was slaughter and was actually killing animals on Monday. We passed them at the farrowing farm. Victor and Jesus were moving sows to the farrowing farms. I think that you should have that variety in your life. I don't think you should wake up every morning and stun pigs. But you spend this amount of money to build a facility, you really should run it not just 5 days a week. You should run it 2 shifts a week. And when you go down that path far enough, you end up with 37 plants in the country that kill 2 shifts a day, 16 pigs a minute, 1,000 and some an hour, and it's 100 and some million pigs a year, and it's 37 plants kill 96% of them. So we're going to stay off that treadmill. It does make our job more difficult, but I firmly believe slaughter and processing, a much bigger percentage of it should be done on farms. It should be done as part of the work week, not the whole work week, and it should be delivered directly to consumers, individuals, restaurants, institutions. We should be feeding some of the schools and the universities. It should be in our actual local communities in the big cities close to us, and we should be at least 7 to 15% of the food supply. And we're an affluent enough country to do that, but we're getting further away from that, not closer to that, because facilities our size, worse than that 37 that are 96% of the hog supply, facilities our size are 0.3% of the volume of pigs in the United States. Wow. So if you do less than 200 pigs a week, 10,000 a year, or less, you're 0.3% of the U.S. hog volume. We should be, at least 7-10%. If we want a resilient food supply, if we want a food supply that doesn't have a whole bunch of hidden cost and baggage, we want nutrient-dense food, we want vibrant communities. There's a whole host of reasons, both on the positive side, and there's a whole host of reasons on the baggage on the negative side over there. But we should wake up tomorrow as a country. We should wake up tomorrow as an administration. We should wake up tomorrow as a USDA. We should wake up as consumers and say, that's really what we want, because pigs deserve that. Employees deserve that. Rural America deserves that. Consumers deserve that. It's, in my opinion, it's not really a hard sell. We should just do it.